5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's time to count down the top 5. Brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
I got to tell you, Eric, I'm looking forward to this one. We're going to be breaking down the top 5 acquisitions that WCW made from WWE. So who are talent playing in New York who could be lured down to Atlanta that made a difference? That's what we asked Eric to list his top 5. And boy, last week's top 5 got everybody fired up. Stay tuned. We'll do our YouTube comment of the week next week or in our next segment. But first, who do you think was Eric's most invaluable acquisition from WWE? Let us know in the comments below. Eric, will start at the bottom of the list. It's only top 5, so it's not really bottom of the list. Coming in at number 5, you've got the one and only Roddy Piper. As a reminder, he was at WrestleMania in 1996 as a stand-in for Scott Hall against Goldust in the backlot brawl of WrestleMania. But then at the end of Halloween Havoc, right after Hulk Hogan had beaten Randy Savage, here came another icon from the 80s. I think it's fascinating that Roddy Piper did WrestleMania and Starrcade in the same year. He's also the same guy who was on the first Starrcade ever and the first WrestleMania ever. He was making trips back and forth here, and he comes in at number 5 for you. Why was his 1996 acquisition such a big deal, Eric?
For me, it kind of came from out of nowhere. It's not like I was having conversations about the possibility of bringing in Roddy. As a matter of fact, I wasn't looking to bring anybody in. We had a pretty full roster. I didn't feel like we had any additional needs at that time. But Roddy became available, and I learned about that through a guy by the name of Mitch Ackerman, who at the time was vice president of production at Disney Studios in Los Angeles, and Barry Bloom as well. And they had set up a meeting at Mitch's house. Mitch and Roddy were really close friends and ended up just hitting it off. So, I mean, I don't think like the week before I had no intention of ever, Roddy was not even on my radar. And then he became available. He became interested. He put Barry Bloom together, and Mitch Ackerman reached out to me, and I went to Mitch's house. We had a great meeting, and I just got along with Roddy. I just enjoyed him. I enjoyed talking to him about creative. He was out there, like really, really out there, but he was one of those guys one of those people. I compare him to racehorses, and I'm not like an expert on horse races, but I know, generally speaking, that it's a lot easier to slow a fast horse down than it is to speed a slow horse up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Roddy was a really fast horse. He was out there. But you could bring him back, or you could take some of those ideas and kind of center them just a little bit so they weren't quite as outside the box as sometimes they were presented, and you ended up with really good stuff. And then you add to the fact that no matter what it is you planned and what you thought you were going to get with Roddy Piper on a live television show, you were always flying without a net. You kind of thought you knew what was coming, but you knew you couldn't be sure because Roddy wasn't sure. And I kind of like that energy. It made it fun and exciting, slightly dangerous. But that's where we were. That's where our stories were. That's where our characters were at that point in time. We're fever pitch with the NWO. So between my personal feelings about Roddy, having gotten to know him just a little bit, business-wise, just my vibe for him, his reputation, obviously he had a tremendous amount of equity within the audience. It's not like nobody knew who Roddy Piper was, or his story and previous relationship with Hulk, which kind of gives you an automatic backstory to at least springboard from in one way, shape, or form. So it was really important, and it came along at a critical time, and Roddy had a big impact.
Coming in at number 4 on Eric's top 5 list of acquisitions from WWE was the Macho Man Randy Savage. I mean, this was a big one. Clearly one of the biggest icons of 80s wrestling. When you think about that golden era of WWF, I think most people agree Hulk Hogan, biggest star in the world, is certainly in that genre. But Randy Savage was probably the number 2 for the 80s, don't you think?
Yeah. I was just sitting here thinking, what's a good analogy or metaphor I could use? And I can't think of one other than, Hulk Hogan coming to WCW was like seeing a giant piece of snow coming down from the side of a mountain. Randy was like not as big as a big chunk of snow, but he's like the littler chunks that start coming when the avalanche begins. Right? So you get the big break, and then you get some smaller breaks that start coming, and before you know it, the whole side of the mountain is coming down around you. And Randy was that. Hulk came first, and it obviously got everybody's attention. But when Randy came, it signaled something different. Hulk coming signaled one thing. Randy joining Hulk and leaving WWE, he left an opportunity to be an announcer. Randy didn't want to be a color commentator. Vince thought that Randy's career was over in the ring. Thought he was too old. He aged out. So he wanted Randy doing color. Randy didn't want to do color because he didn't think he was aged out. He still believed he had tread on the tire in the ring. And he believed in himself so much that he said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going over there. And he came. And it almost was as important as Hulk coming over, in the sense that it gave permission to a lot of other guys who might not have previously felt comfortable exploring an opportunity in in WCW, to at least start having conversations.
And are you saying that, Eric, because other guys would say, well, yeah, of course they do that for Hulk, but I'm not Hulk. And they felt like Savage was more relatable to them?
More relatable, but Randy was also paranoid as hell, and everybody knew it. So if Randy was making that move,
I got
you. Might be something to it.
Let me ask you, I know you're not Randy Savage and you're not in the mind of Randy, but do you think the performer in him, because I thought about this a lot, like if Hulk Hogan, let's say he retired after WrestleMania 3 or 4 or whatever, like let's say No Holds Barred is a huge hit and he becomes a megastar and Hollywood came calling. Savage had all of that built-in equity from the mega powers and getting that rub and becoming the world champ at WrestleMania 4. I mean, how do you follow WrestleMania 3 with Hogan and Andre? You have Hulk Hogan endorse Randy Savage. That's what happens a year later. So it was a big deal. But I've often wondered, hey, if Hogan sort of pieces out in, say, 88 with the success of the box office of 89, and he just says, I'm full-time Hollywood now, I think everybody would have understood if that opportunity presented itself. It didn't work out that way. But Savage had to think, if Hulk's not here, I'm the top guy. He may have thought that in 88 because that's what happened. When Hulk left to make the movie, Savage was the top guy. But when Hulk came back, of course, Savage moved down the cards a little bit. So my question is, when Hulk leaves for WCW in 93, do you think subconsciously somewhere in the back of his mind, he may have thought, hey, now's my chance? And when he got the insight from Vince that he was going with a youth movement, he realized, not only do I not have a chance to take Hulk's spot, I might not even be on the freaking show the way I want to be.
I don't know. And I've never had those conversations with Randy in terms of whether or not he thought he could be the number one guy in WWE with Hulk gone. I didn't get that impression. Randy made it really clear he just wanted to work. He wanted to work in the ring. That he just was convinced that he had more to offer as an in-ring performer. And he just wasn't ready to give it up. It was really that simple. And I really don't think Randy cared whether he was the top guy in WWF at the time or whether he was just prominently featured on the card and able to work in the ring. He just wanted the juice. He wanted the fix of going out there and performing. He still had so much that he wanted to give. He wasn't ready to cash it in, and Vince wasn't ready to have him not cash it in. So I never got the impression he was worried about being the top guy.
Do you think he could have been the top guy? Because he was always top guy adjacent. Like, it was Hogan and Savage was his friend. Don't get me wrong, not being ugly, just being honest. But he was never really positioned as the top guy. Even when he's the world champ, Hogan is in the orbit somewhere. Like, you don't think that sort of gnawed at him on some level? Like, I want to prove that I can be the top guy. Because as a wrestling fan, I totally buy Savage as a top guy. Don't you?
Yes and no, to be really honest about it. There are certain, I think wrestling is no different than acting. It's exactly the same. It's just a different kind of acting, really. Some people are just born as stars. Some of them don't even have a great deal of talent. Let me take that back. Some of them are huge stars, but not because of their talent.
There you go.
Some people have a tremendous amount of talent, but they're lacking that something that allows them to become a star. I mean, the star, not a co-star, not a supporting cast member. And I don't think Randy had that quality that the audience would have embraced as a long-term megastar. A Rock, a John Cena, an Undertaker, Hogan, Flair. He just didn't, and it had nothing to do with talent. And he was amazing. He was so unique. He was so gifted in so many ways. But there was that something that was missing. Don't know what it is. And I think there's other stars today that fall into that same category, and other stars in the past that fall into that category. Bret Hart comes to mind. Bret Hart was so good from a technical perspective. There's probably nobody that didn't want to work with Bret Hart because, much like Ric Flair, in Bret's own way, and Rick's, they were different people, but in the one thing they had in common is they could make just about anybody they work with look good. In fact, they could make anybody they work with look great in some cases. So anybody in their right mind would want to work with a Ric Flair or a Bret Hart. And because of that, they were very elevated up the card. But with the exception of Rick, and I can't go into the NWA era and all that because I wasn't around. I wasn't paying attention to that. And we'll just focus on Bret because I think that he's actually a better example. Bret Hart was so good in so many ways. We can all agree to that.
Yeah.
But there was something missing. They've tried it. WWE tried it with him. And Bret's always got an excuse. I was working with Bad News Brown. How am I supposed to have charisma if I'm working with Bad News Brown? Okay, it's Bad News Brown's fault. You don't have any charisma. There was always a reason why Bret was prevented because of somebody else from actually making it to the very top for an extended period of time to be in the same category as a Ric Flair or a John Cena or a Steve Austin or an Undertaker. Bret never got there. Not because it was anybody else's fault, and not even because it was Bret's fault. Bret was just not born with that one thing that kind of puts you into that star category. You can call it charisma, you can call it whatever you want. It's a presence. And you either have that presence or you don't. And you could have a tremendous amount of skills in every other area, but if you don't have that one thing that makes you a star, that one intangible thing that is consistent with everybody who is a star and consistently lacking in those people who never quite get there, whatever that is, Randy kind of fell into that category. I hope that made sense and not sound disrespectful, but it's true. It's the same thing in Hollywood. You look at people who are never going to be stars, but they're always going to be working with a star. And there's a reason for that.
Do you remember there ever being discussions that you had with Savage or Piper? Did they ever express to you that they felt offended by their previous WCW negotiations? As the story goes, Jim Herd was really high on both of these guys and would have loved to have been able to snag them, but I guess he just didn't have the budget for that. Have you heard that? Did they say anything like that?
No.
Did you know right away? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say we didn't. This is the first time hearing anything like that.
Do you did you know right away that you would be able to underwrite a lot of Savage's salary with the Slim Jim deal, or does he present that in person, or how does that conversation come to be?
Probably not in the very first conversation, but definitely in the second or third one. Like, it wasn't front and center. Front and center was creative. Randy was feeling me out, kind of feeling out the situation. Hulk was there, and Hulk was instrumental in getting Randy to join, by the way. I mean, they had this weird, love-hate relationship. And at that time, it was Hulk that called me. It was Randy called Hulk. Hulk called me. I called Randy. That was the three-way phone tag. Randy was really feeling me out a little bit because he didn't know anything about me.
Right.
But once we got past the feeling out, let's get to know each other conversation, which probably only lasted one conversation because I don't spend a lot of time doing that shit. We got into, okay, how's this going to work? And that's probably when Slim Jim came into the picture, and Randy put me in touch with Slim Jim right away. I mean, the guys at Slim Jim were as excited about Randy coming to WCW as Randy was, because Slim Jim wasn't going to get a lot of love with Randy as a commentator. Still get a presence, still be there, but not quite the same thing as Randy in the ring.
I do want to ask you, do you think with the benefit of hindsight that Savage deserves more credit for the Nitro boom? I know that he played his role with the NWO, but when you go back to the very early era of Nitro, it feels like his feud with Randy Savage and the involvement with Miss Elizabeth, I mean, that really was a shot in the arm to WCW house show business. And he was such an identifiable character. Like, every wrestling fan or anyone who had watched wrestling in the last 10 years knew who the Macho Man was. He was such a pop culture icon at that point. And I feel like when we talk about the success of Nitro, we almost immediately talk about Sting and Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and the NWO. But it almost feels like we sort of gloss over Savage a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's partly because Savage moved around a lot. His character kind of changed fairly regularly within WCW, and it was always good. He was always doing something fun. And no, I don't think Randy is underappreciated when it comes to the success of Nitro, because he had so many moments that people do recognize. But I don't think, if I look at it from this perspective, to answer the question, would Nitro have been any less successful if Randy would never have joined? Probably not. Did it become any more successful specifically because Randy was part of it? Probably not. But was Randy absolutely one of the top contributors, along with a lot of other people at the time? A number of other people that were core contributors? Absolutely he was. But it would be hard to go, if it wasn't for that thing that we did with Randy in this match over here and that storyline, Nitro would have never been as hot. I can't honestly say that.
The big question everybody wants to know, with the benefit of hindsight, how bizarre is it that McMahon didn't have him locked down where he couldn't leave?
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a story to that, and I don't know it, but it is kind of interesting because you would think after Hulk Hogan left,
yeah,
that would have been kind of like, all right, better button things up here, because things are not the way they used to be anymore. And clearly he didn't do that with Randy. Now, there may be a reason why he didn't do it. He may have undervalued Randy to the point where he didn't think Randy would go to WCW. Or didn't, for whatever reason, perhaps Vince didn't think WCW would take Randy Savage. I don't know. It's hard to imagine. But it is unique that he didn't have him locked up, given what he just went through with Hulk.
Oh, man, you said there's a story there. And Eric, let's talk about number 3 on your top 5 acquisitions from WWE. No surprise here. The big man, Kevin Nash, comes in at number 3. This just feels like a laydown to me, but I'm surprised since very shortly after he makes his debut, he sent you on a pretty rough crash landing. Why does Kevin Nash come in at number 3?
Kevin Nash was chapter 2 of a 3-chapter book called the NWO. And really all the last 3 guys, really, you can interchange them in some respects, at least with Scott. And Scott is number 2, Hulk is number 1. So I'm going to spill those beans, but I have to do that in order to kind of frame this. Kevin and Scott coming in, because really it was a tandem creative strategy intentionally from the get-go. Once I knew Scott became available, and then it seems like within a week or so, Kevin Nash became available, the idea for the NWO started to form in my head, as we've discussed many times in the past. Scott Hall coming down, Kevin Nash showing up as a surprise. Who's the third man? Ooh, Hulk Hogan sees this on a VHS that Jimmy Hart sent him. 10 days later, he's calling me, wanting me to come out to LA. Hulk wants to be the third man. All of that happened, but it started with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. I mean, those two are like number 1, number 2A and 2B. You know, we should eliminate number 3, but it was such a pivot point in WCW. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash together. They came in at different times, obviously on the calendar, but they kind of both came in at the same time for the same reason. Definitely a major pivot point, not only for WCW, but for the freaking industry to this day.
Well, no doubt about it. You've already spilled the beans. Number 2 on your list. They go together like peas and carrots. We're talking about Kevin Nash. And of course, number 2, Scott Hall, the Outsiders. Is it just because he's first, or was it he had a bigger personality? I mean, why does Scott Hall come in at number 2 over Kevin Nash?
It was, maybe because he came in first. Maybe because he's the first one to reach out to me and Kevin called a week later. I don't know. It's just how, in my mind, the way it plays out. And there's really no justifiable formula for it. It's just the way I feel.
We know that Scott Hall was upset that his income fell significantly in 1995. It was a bad year for the WWF. I think, as Bruce tells the story, Vince would often say he had to pull $6 million out of his ass, meaning there was just a loss. There was a lot of red ink, and he's having to self-fund the thing at that point. It can no longer just stand on its own. So the boys start to feel that. They're paid on the houses too, and they're looking for, as the old wrestling cliche goes, the money in the miles. And I think the guarantee was important, but almost equally important, at least for Hall and Nash, was the limited number of dates, because they had families, or they wanted to, right?
Yes. Kevin was starting his family, and Scott had one. And look, we say limited number of dates. It was 180 dates that we could book them. But guess what? There's a travel day on each side of those dates.
Right.
So it's not like they were working on a part-time schedule, right? They were still 250 days away from home in their world or so, potentially. But at least it represented stability.
Yes.
It was better than 325 days away from home. 250 was better than 350, I guess. And it was also the stability of the income. How do you get you're in the mortgage business, you own a mortgage company. It's really tough for people to get mortgages when they've got jobs that sometimes they pay them a lot, sometimes they pay them not so much. It's hard to budget that. It's hard to plan for that. It makes life, challenging when you're a freelancer and you don't know from week to week or year to year how much you're going to make. How do you plan for retirement that way? I mean, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it makes it much more complicated and challenging and hard to stay on track. So coming to WCW, they weren't going to make potentially as much money as potentially they could in WWE because of the nature of pay structure. But I don't think either one of them felt like they were going to end up in that top of the card position for any long period of time to make the serious money that could have been made potentially. I think they both recognized how Vince perceived them on the ladder of characters. And it would make a lot of money, but they'd be giving up so much of their life to do it. They looked at WCW and went, that guaranteed money looks awful sweet. This is at least as much or more than I'm making now. And I get to be home with my family. I'll go do that. And that's really all it was, based on what they told me.
Again, I realize it's hard to compare back then to now, but I just want to draw a comparison because I think the number that we've often heard for these guys on their first contract is $750,000, or as a lot of people would throw it around, Sting money. That was an industry term once upon a time. And the idea that they're going to come in for that amount of money back then felt like a king's ransom. But by today's standard, if you adjust that number for inflation, that's like a little over 1.5 million in 2025 dollars. And I don't think anyone could argue or dispute that they were worth that. By today's dollars, there's probably 24 guys who make more than 1.5. And I would argue respectfully that very little had the effect. Not all of them had the effect that Kevin Nash and Scott Hall had on WCW for that money. Don't you think?
100%. I don't think probably half of them added together generated as much revenue as Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were responsible for in WCW.
Well, to the surprise of no one, I mean, we already know what's coming. The absolute number one biggest acquisition from the WWF for WCW is Hulk Hogan. It changed everything. When he comes in and you announce the match with Ric Flair, it's the first time Ted Turner says, "Hey, let me be on camera. I want to do the contract signing for this." It was big business. It meant a lot to Ted. It meant a lot to WCW. They set a gate record, an attendance record, a pay-per-view record. Every record WCW had was shattered after Hulk's very first pay-per-view. That gets lost. People want to immediately jump into, oh, they were tired of the yellow and red. They may have been eventually, but they weren't in July of 94. And man, when he turned heel, it was like trying to drink water from a fire hydrant. Just how massive and immediate the success was for WCW. I mean, just from a licensing standpoint, not just the things we saw on camera, but behind the scenes, this is the most significant jump in wrestling history, is it not?
It is. And in so many ways that people, we don't talk about much. But here's one small example. Not sexy, not cool, not going to be a headline in anybody's dirt sheet. But one of the reasons that we began to get more favorable pay-per-view scheduling opportunities is because of Hulk Hogan. WCW was not on anybody's, list of things to get excited about when it came to pay-per-view distribution because we didn't have a track record of generating revenue. So we had no leverage in negotiations or discussions. We were on the wrong end of a 60-40 split when I took over the company, meaning we'd do a pay-per-view, we'd charge somebody $1. The pay-per-view distributor would get 60 cents, we would get 40 cents. Hulk Hogan comes along and we're 50-50. We pick up a 10% margin on pay-per-view just because Hulk Hogan's on the team. Now, 10% margin doesn't seem like much. $3, $4, $5 million of pay-per-view? $10 million of pay-per-view? It's a lot. It's a lot more than we were paying Hulk. It shows up on the bottom line, but it doesn't make any headlines. That's just one example. And then you look at the licensing and merchandising opportunities you just brought up. We couldn't even have a serious conversation with anybody that was legitimate in that business because they all knew we weren't licensable. Our product was so fucking dead, nobody wanted to put our brand on their product. It was what it was until it wasn't. And it wasn't because of Hulk Hogan. All of a sudden, people that wouldn't even return our phone calls in the licensing industry were now reaching out to us because Hulk had a track record. They knew they could bet on it. They knew what they could expect or thought they could expect. So he changed so many things in so many ways that impacted the bottom line in so many ways beyond Professor Dave Meltzer's analysis and the dirt sheet analysis and the common just narrative that only measures ticket sales and questionably pay-per-view. And nobody knows anything about how ad sales operate. So that number never gets impacted in these discussions or referenced even in these discussions. But across all metrics that you can imagine, licensing and merchandising, pay-per-view, ad sales, sponsorships, anything else that's out there, it all scaled up 48 hours after Hulk Hogan joined WCW. And then you look at what happens afterwards. Randy Savage comes along. I don't think Randy would have made that move if Hulk Hogan would have made it first. I really don't. I didn't then, I still don't. In fact, I didn't then, and I'm even more convinced now. He never would have done that. Hulk Hogan was the canary in the coal mine for Randy. If Hulk Hogan came to WCW and said, hey, Randy, you might like it here, Randy's gone. And that's exactly what happened. Hulk Hogan doesn't show up in WCW, Randy's not coming. He's sticking with the sure money. Because Randy was tight with his cash too, by the way. He was smart with his money. He would have stayed where he stayed, but he was willing to take the risk because of Hulk. So many things that just looking at the surface of the information that's available, you don't really appreciate the impact sometimes that certain individuals have or certain strategies have. But I don't think anybody can underestimate or undervalue what Hulk Hogan brought to WCW.
No doubt about it. I think Hulk Hogan is going to be number one on everybody's list. But do you disagree with Eric on 1 through 5? We know coming in at number 1 was Hulk Hogan. Number 2 was Scott Hall. Number 3 was Kevin Nash. Number 4, which I'll admit, I don't know that I would have guessed it this way, Randy Savage. And then number 5, Roddy Piper. I don't think I would have put Piper on the list. I don't know who it would have been, but I was shocked to see 5 for Piper for you. What is your top 5? Let us know in the comments below. We definitely want to know who your top 5 acquisitions were that WCW picked up from WWE. SaveWithConrad.com.
My name is Rajiv. I'm in Sacramento, California. I came to Save with Conrad because I've heard Conrad talk about how he helps people all the time save money and the best route to go for getting some mortgages and finances done. And having heard so many different testimonials in the past, it made the most sense to go this route. We were in the market for a new house and we wanted to know what we could afford. So we spoke with Steve and then Diane to get through the pre-approval process to see what we could afford. And then once we were able to understand that aspect of it, that was when we were able to shop around for a house to get a mortgage through Save with Conrad. Everybody on the team was great. Everybody really explained everything fully to where it was more in like layman's terms to where I could understand it as someone not in the business or having shopped around for houses too many times. So being able to understand every step of the process and talking with everyone on the team about that was really, really helpful. And it made me feel really confident that I was going the right route. I would definitely recommend Save with Conrad to others. I know that sometimes people look at it and they go, oh, they're based in Alabama, what could they help me with? But I'm out here in California and they were able to square everything away and get things done really quickly, as opposed to sometimes even people out here don't move as quickly as the Save with Conrad team. So everything was really well done, really efficient, and I would definitely recommend Save with Conrad to others. My name is Rajiv. I'm in Sacramento, California, and I was able to get into my dream home with SaveWithConrad.com.
That's number 212, non-equal housing lender. SaveWithConrad.com.